Hey everyone, joining. Thanks for joining us today. We're just giving everyone a few extra minutes as everyone starts to come in at 12 o'clock here. Looking forward to a great presentation today from our friend Chris Cianfilioni of Kimley Horn and Associates. So it should be very interesting to say the least.
Setting a high bar, James. I appreciate it.
Man, it's exciting. And I know this plan has been, definitely blood, sweat, and tears for Chris for a couple years now. So he's definitely the authority on all things Marie Selby Botanical Gardens master plan.
The labor of love.
Labor of love. I love it. And we'll give everyone a couple more minutes. I think we'll probably power up about 12:03 or 12:04. So if you need to run out and grab another cup of coffee or a water or a snack, feel free. I have my Trader Joe's cold brew coffee right here, Chris, ready to roll.
Nice.
Just staying on top of it.
Someone was just telling me Big Top is getting into coffee brewing.
Yes, I did hear that as well. So look out. It's a smart market, I guess. You have a couple beers and then they have the coffee to make you feel better the next morning, right? It's like a dentist that hands out candy. It just keeps circling around, We have too much fun, Chris. That's the problem.
I know. Good problems.
Good problems to have. And we'll give it one more minute here for any last minute participants coming in. We appreciate Chris's time today for sure.
Always happy to share.
Yep. I know everyone was kind of concerned about a little bit of a slowdown, but I think a lot of people right now aren't feeling that in our field. So staying busy, which is good.
Yeah, very, very fortunate for sure.
Definitely. All right, well, it's 12:04, so I'm going to go ahead and start things up here. I'll start my presentation, a little slideshow, just kind of do an introduction here, and I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Chris afterwards. So thank you all of you for joining today. This is the Florida Planning, Zoning, and Association October 20th luncheon webinar meeting. We usually do these things in person, but during this year, obviously, a lot has gone down with all the fun COVID stuff. So we've been shifting to the online series for a couple of meetings now, and it's been working great. So just a couple quick housekeeping matters. We do obviously have some Zoom meeting guidelines. If everyone can please keep their microphones muted. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand for the Q&A, unmute your microphone when called. If you have any issues, just type in the chat, let me know. I'll be moderating on the side here. And we'll go ahead and have a great meeting. So for those of you who don't know, this is the FPZA. We're a Florida Planning, Zoning, and Association organization here in the state of Florida, obviously. Vivian Dronick, AICP, is our president. Myself, James Ehrman, vice president, and Philip D. Maria, also as well a vice president for the organization this year. If you aren't familiar with us, there's a lot of great directors that we have on our board that up on the screen here that you can see from a variety of organizations, public sector, private sector. We really do try to have all different kinds of voices and perspectives involved with it. So if you're not involved and you want to get involved, you can always go to the website fpza.org and reach out to us and let us know. We're always happy to have new members, learn new things. And as kind of a side note, a lot of these presentations are worth AICP credits. So for anyone that's always chasing down credits for their certification, this is a great opportunity to do that. Today's presentation is going to be an update on the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens Master Plan by Chris Cianfilione, associate with Kimley Horn. Chris and I work together on a lot of different fun projects at Kimley Horn, and this is definitely one of the more visible projects that we've seen here. Chris has done a lot of work throughout the state of Florida. A local guy, been in the state for a long time, and really just an asset to the community and planning at large here in the state of Florida. So we're excited to hear what he has to say about the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens Master Plan update. I'm sure you've read about it in the news, heard about it, seen signs in the community, been asked about it at a farmer's market or a store. It's a very, very visible project, a lot going on with it, a lot of public input, and a lot of difficult public hearings at times too. So that's kind of all part of that planning process that we all know and love so much. And Chris is going to go ahead and go through where that plan has been, where it's going, and kind of what the latest and greatest on the whole process is. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, hand it over to Chris. And Chris, we're so excited to have you today. Thanks for your time.
Sure thing. Definitely excited to see my face on the screen and be in front of everyone, kind of sharing the update for Selby. So thank you for joining today. Want to make sure we can get this showing good. Everyone see the presentation okay? Theoretically?
Yeah, yep, we got it, Chris, yep.
Perfect, all right. So for those of you who attended an update last year or who've kind of been following along with the project, Selby began kind of this master planning effort in 2017 to come up with a new plan for their campus to address not only some of the kind of antiquated issues that they had on the property from an entitlements perspective, but also, you know, the ability to upgrade their infrastructure and kind of function as the world-class institution that they are, even though they're in, you know, kind of today dilapidated infrastructure. So in 2019, last year, we submitted a kind of comprehensive plan amendment, a zoning text amendment, rezone, site plans, easement vacation, a big package that went before the planning board and city commission here in Sarasota. And in, you know, I think it was early November of last year, the city commission in a 2-3 vote denied the approval of that project. So Selby did quite a bit of soul searching, as well as quite a bit of actual physical location searching that we helped them out with. And ultimately, as their board and as our design team came with kind of some modified solutions to some of the biggest concerns that we heard from the community, Selby has opted to go back through the process again. And so what we're going to look at today is the presentation that we gave about a month ago to the planning board. The planning board recently recommended approval of the plan in a 4-1 vote. And so we are anxiously awaiting a new city commission. And as soon as that commission is seated, anxiously awaiting them to set a date for these hearings to be able to proceed this hopefully to the next step. And all things crossed, hopeful adoption of the amendments and you know, ability for the project to proceed. So the biggest things that we heard in the 2019 kind of applications at hand was really just a overwhelming outcry of some of the immediate adjacent neighbors that were opposed predominantly to the notion of the comprehensive plan amendment, which at the time was seeking a metropolitan regional future land use classification. The reason that we were pursuing that was because that was very much in alignment with the goals, objectives, and strategies of that future land use classification, and really provided for the most arduous process to make any changes to this property in the future. Selby is wanting to provide for a level of certainty that no future board actions or decisions could sell off portions of this property to pay the bills, because that's been something that has been on the table multiple times throughout the organization's history. So there was that aspect of it. The other aspect of the comprehensive plan that was necessitating it was the notion that Selby was proposing a restaurant that would be open to the public, much like the Ringlings, Muse restaurants, and other institutions kind of across the state and nation. In a cultural institution, have restaurants that you can go to, and you might not necessarily be a visiting member of that day, but just want to go to the restaurant. That was certainly something that Selby was very interested in, not only from a revenue generation perspective for a nonprofit, but also to bring new potential members and new potential guests to the gardens, and a different group of folks coming onto the property who might not be there otherwise. Growing that kind of membership base. So we heard loud and clear this opposition to the comprehensive plan. So we had to rework the plan to be able to provide for this dining opportunity, but not have it open to the public. And we also needed to work within the existing future land use classifications of this community office institutional, and what that allowed for with regards to height and uses and things like that. So a lot of reworking from the whole design team, not just our folks here at Kimley Horn in Sarasota, but working with Olin, a landscape architecture master planning firm, as well as Overland Partners, who's the design architect out of San Antonio, Texas. So went to the drawing board, worked hard and fast. After the commission hearing was denied, we did additional meetings with the community members to kind of make sure what we heard, which was this resounding no change to the comprehensive plan, and then a lot of commentary specifically regarding the use of the restaurant, the height and scale of the parking structure that was proposed, as well as trying to think of the way to phrase it. Because of the limited understanding by most of the general population with detailed traffic studies, there was a lot of apprehension and concern about the findings of the traffic study that were done in 2019 as potentially not being indicative of all of the kind of things that could happen on the property. So those were kind of the key things that we heard from the residents, was to try and move the project forward, that Selby needed to kind of capitulate on. One of the others was with regards to events and sound, and what Selby could do to mitigate their current operations in regards to the frequency and location of events, as well as the intensity of the sound that was coming from the property. So that's kind of what we set off late last year, early this year, to reimagine the plan and to come forward with ways to be able to implement Selby's master plan, while not entirely scrapping years of work and Selby's investment on coming up with a plan that they really loved and that addressed their needs. So I think it's important to note, the whole reason that we're here with this unique issue on the zoning is that, the existing zoning is comprised of 3 existing zone districts that are not implementing zones within the future land use. And botanical gardens are only allowed to exist as a vested right rather than a permitted use. And they're only allowed to do that on the RSF1 and RMF1 pieces of the property today. So, the current kind of zoning and future land use maps that the city kind of has in place here were initiated back in the 70s and never really changed since. And it is really just kind of this band-aid of acknowledging that Selby is a unique use, but not really going forth and fixing the problem. So they're really in a pinch. There's really no meaningful expansion or kind of renovation that can happen to the campus without a rezone. And when you look at the other office zone districts that are within the community office institutional future land use classification, those are office zone districts that, again, are not reflective of the uses that have been happening on the site for decades, and really not something that Selby was looking to pursue, to allow for a mix of uses and allow for residential development and office uses and things like that. They really just want to be able to have codified, their existence beyond just a vested right. So that's really kind of what triggered this whole notion. So based on about 40 some odd hours of public testimony last fall, there were some significant changes in regards to the zoning itself and how we kind of changed the approach on the plan. Those came in the notion of the primary uses being removed. So elimination of the commercial restaurant and commercial parking to allow just botanical gardens, parks and open space, and basic utilities. It further restricted and defined accessory uses. Again, the principal use is botanical gardens, but the code does not really get into a definition for botanical gardens that captures the uniqueness of the variety of things happening on their site. And so further kind of restricting that and providing for additional restrictions on what accessory restaurants can be and where they can be located. We further reduced the development standards by reducing the floor area ratio down all the way to 0.2, and providing for a maximum height that was a big reduction in what was proposed previously, from 75 feet down to 40, as well as reducing the building coverage restrictions so that, in the grand scheme of things, as far as COI is concerned, this zoning text amendment is really the most restrictive of the zone classifications for the implementing zones. It removes development rights and reduces the allowable development and really significantly restricts the use that's allowed on this property. And why Selby went forth with the notion of supporting a botanical gardens district that could go anywhere in the city, but really to capture the uniqueness of these types of organizations and operations that is not consistent with an office zone designation. So we had to make sure that this checked all the goals and objectives of the city's comprehensive plan, which we presented that we feel very strongly that it does, and really tied it back to those goals and land use regulations from the Sarasota 2030 city plan. Really all of the applicable chapters are met, and I think that this plan and the changes that it went through really resulted in a better compatible development program for the site, and I think is something that shows kind of the compromise of give and take that Selby and the community kind of went through to come back with something better. On the site today, I think that when you look at a limited kind of acreage that Selby has at about 14 acres, they're very small botanical gardens footprint. When you consider all of the work that they do for research across the world, as well as serving as a destination for visitors and families alike. And on that 14 acres, they've got about a third of the site, a little more than that, that's designated to really inefficient kind of gravel parking lots. And so, as good planners and designers, we all know that a great smart way, especially in a pretty urban condition across the street from downtown, to address your parking needs, and be smart on the utilization of the site, is to stack those uses, not only from the parking perspective, but also a lot of their research operations, their administrative operations, storage and warehousing. Stacking things vertically is a better utilization of the site, and can be done in such a way that it still results in great quality architecture that's compatible with the surrounding area. I think that it's also important to know, we hear a lot of feedback from the community with regards to, my back, Selby's doing all of these things in my backyard. That's a scaled football field, back of the end zone to back of the end zone, from the adjacent residences across the bayou. And so the sense of scale on the site, I think, is an important one to remember, that, we're talking about improvements that are, more than a football field away from the nearest adjacent single family residence. Um, and I think it's a unique site in itself. It's really kind of in this transitional buffer zone, and you've got everything from mansions south of the bayou to multifamily residences kind of on all sides, to the east, of varying scales and complexities and types. And then downtown 18-story and 5-story condos, literally across the street. So I think that when you look at the notion of compatibility, and you look at the notion of scale, and what we're trying to do to be respectful to all neighbors, I think being surrounded by this diverse mix is pretty unique, and something that lends itself to the uniqueness of the approach in the design of the site and the botanical gardens use, and locating the most intense and largest scale buildings, to the north adjacent to downtown. One of the other things that we are proposing on this plan is this vacation of a public access easement. When Palm Avenue was vacated in 2011, there was a planning board member and a city commissioner at the time that were really championing the notion of providing for public access to the water, even though it never did. And so the idea of vacating the right of way was stipulated with the requirement of a what I frankly think of as a little bit of an ill-conceived public access easement. The easement is legally defined in such a way that it doesn't even cover the existing sidewalks that were there. And really, at its terminus, it dead ends in the backside of mangroves without any real benefit. What it does do is it bifurcates Selby's property, and is a liability for them. Selby owns the entirety of the property around it, left and right. And by having this, open public access 24/7, it's a real security issue. And really, as Selby looks to expand its garden space with the new master plan, this easement simply couldn't remain in its configuration without being vacated. And in its vacation, I think what we are proposing and what the plan is for regards to new public areas for access is certainly much improved. And then, kind of lastly, with the existing conditions, are just the notion that Selby's, kind of bought these adjacent properties, residential zone properties, over the last 40, almost 50 years, and has never really put forth a plan for how to kind of deal with the contiguous ownership. And it's just a mess out there. For any of you guys who've been out to the property, especially on a busy weekend, it is unsafe at best, and confusing, at a minimum. And so going in and organizing and cleaning up the kind of site access and making it safer and more efficient is certainly something that was a tenet of the master plan. There's been a lot of concern with regards to Selby's activities and sound, and a lot of, I'd say misstatements about anecdotally what's been happening over Selby, and they've been, out of the blue, they're all of a sudden having weddings and events that go into the evening and what have you, and it's really just, I mean, I hate to say the phrase, but it's really fake news. It is, Selby has been an event, an activity hub for the community since its opening in the mid 70s. And so, celebrations of life and love have gone on this property for a long time. And in fact, Selby has been reducing the quantity of those events over the past about 5 years, while making them better quality. And so, things like having a better vendor for food and beverage, better programmed events, better partnerships with local organizations like the ballet and the opera, have allowed Selby to do fewer events of higher quality. So the notion of, noise all of a sudden at the property really just doesn't hold water. But Selby acknowledges for sure that the events that they do have, whether it be, an afternoon garden music series that they have a few times a year on Sunday afternoons, or even, weddings that, might have a private DJ come in, there's certainly things that they could have done better as it relates to the impacts to the surrounding area for sound. So Selby has up and running as of the beginning of this year, a gardens-wide kind of very expensive and very intensive kind of sound system that is under their exclusive control. So there are automatic sound meters that are around the property, and a central processing unit, and dozens of smaller speakers located throughout the gardens, so that when there is an event, you don't have one big PA system, one big speaker set up that's blaring music loud to be able to hear it far away. It allows them to play the music at a much quieter level, so that it's still heard and still enjoyable, but significantly has reduced the overall sound levels by about 20 decibels. And so even DJs that come in, they can't bring their own speakers anymore. They have to plug into Selby's system. And Selby is able to do better than the city's sound ordinance at their property line at all times of the day. Whereas the city sound ordinance only has sound restrictions basically in the overnight hours. So really, I think technologically smart and impressive way that they've been able to make an improvement for the surrounding community's benefit. So this is the kind of proposed compromise master plan. And for those of you who are familiar with the previous iterations of the plan, it really does hold a lot of the primary tenets the same. And really the biggest changes in the design of the site stem around the parking structure. It took our teams a lot of collective coordination and effort to be able to revise the design of the Sky Garden, as it was formerly known. It's now the LEAF, the Living Energy Access Facility. And so with my computer got a little too excited to show some awesome renderings. So the structure's got about a 45,000 square foot, 1 megawatt solar array on top that'll provide all the power for phase 1 and most of the future conservatories. But we were still able to honor and provide for everything in green that you see being open and accessible from the public, including expanded multi-use recreational trails along the perimeter connecting the bayfront to the communities to the south, more than doubling the width of that sidewalk in some places. as well as keeping open a kind of sustainability demonstration gardens in this kind of interior court space that talk about all of the sustainable aspects and techniques that Selby is implementing with the plan. Bioswales and pervious pavers, living walls, biomimicry in the architecture design, the solar array that we talked about, gray water reuse, a huge cistern for stormwater collection, treatment, and irrigation use, and several others. One of the other things that we did to the plan is we heard a lot of concerns from the community with regards to the traffic. And while I think that certainly my traffic engineering partners across the region feel unequivocally that the improved intersection will greatly improve the overall efficiency and significantly improve the safety of the intersection. The community at large still had concerns about the notion of Orange Avenue kind of serving as the primary access to the site. So what we did is work with the architecture team to kind of redesign the corner of the Sky Garden here to serve as the primary primary entry point for the gardens, as well as primary signage for the gardens, and the ability to take all service vehicles in through the garage into an interior loading area that's in the garage. Take all of the trash collections from inside of the garage here from Mound Street, and serve as the primary point of access for deliveries, whether it's a FedEx truck or a school bus or a food service truck. All of that can maneuver in and through the garage and not utilize Orange Avenue. And so that was something that took a lot of work and coordination, but something that we think makes a meaningful improvement upon the previous plan. The other thing that we've done is it's already happened actually, is where you see that sign and that car coming out, that is Selby's new registered kind of mailing and site address, so that especially for folks who are coming from out of town, their GPS is going to facilitate and directing them to this location. This is the corner of Orange and Mound, kind of looking at the MERT gardens, the multi-use recreational trail gardens. So you can see 12-foot wide trails, the garage located around existing mature grand oaks, and then proposed mature tree plantings and, in a lush garden setting. As well as keeping the sustainability demonstration gardens in this kind of interior courtyard open to the public as well, were things that as a team we were really proud of, the ability to have these spaces that do a lot to help the public in general understand the sustainable aspects of the project without even stepping foot in Selby's kind of paid, ticketed and secured perimeter. So really trying to have this serve as a model for how sustainable design can be. We did a lot of work on the parking, and at the end of the day, there's I think I've convinced folks enough that the parking capacity is not oversized. It is purposefully undersized, so much so that now the neighbors are concerned that there's not enough parking. And so it's funny to hear the progression of the changes in the dialogue. But basically, this plan eliminated about 30 spaces from the previous plan, and 450 spots are what is proposed on 4 levels of parking in this structure. My computer thinks it wants to change the slide. Bear with me. There we go. Here we're showing all of the off-site roadway improvements, about $1.5 million of private philanthropic dollars going to the upgrading of FDOT and City of Sarasota right-of-way exclusively to really improve and address conditions that have nothing to do with Selby's plan, and are really going to operationally improve the flow of traffic through the intersection and significantly improve the overall safety. We also provided additional refinement to prohibit the exiting traffic to Orange Avenue from turning right and turning into the communities to the south. There's been a lot of concern about increased traffic and cut through traffic through the community. And so literally have gone to the greatest extent possible to not only sign it, but physically prohibit it with, directional curbing and signage and landscaping that really make it next to impossible to do. On Orange Avenue, looking north, Selby is dedicating right-of-way to be able to widen Orange Avenue and add a whole nother turn lane there. And in doing so, will enable the intersection to operate with concurrent phasing, which is going to really increase the throughput of cars through the intersection. Not that this was found to be required from Selby's project, but one that will provide for operational benefits to especially the community to the south. And so without Selby kind of granting that right away and dedicating their land to the public and sacrificing design on building dimensions and things like that, none of these things would really be possible. One of the other things that we did and that the community asked for was for them to essentially dictate what they wanted to see out of the traffic study. So in January, we held a series of meetings with representatives from some of the neighborhood associations to come up with a kind of goals and objectives and requested methodology for a new traffic study to be provided through the city of Sarasota independently of the gardens. That really was an event-based kind of peak worst case on the worst day and the worst month with the most amount of people from Selby that they could ever have to make sure that the proposed traffic improvements will result in no adverse impacts, which is what the study found. And so I think we're expecting to see those results and happy to have the outcome of that request by the traffic, which expanded the scope of area all the way to Bay Vista, Osprey Avenue. It was a pretty egregious request that Selby obliged and was able to reinforce the fact that lo and behold, US 41 and Orange Avenue can handle the traffic. And that also required some updates to our event staging and special event plans. And then here you can see kind of the parking structure itself and with the old elevation on top and the new elevation on the bottom. Basically what we did is previously a proposed precast structure meant that our floor to floor dimensions were pretty high. And so Selby is spending more money to develop a cast in place concrete structure to be able to get the floor slabs down to a very thin datum line. I think architecturally it results in a much more aesthetically pleasing structure and certainly one that kind of pays homage to Sarasota school design. But you can see here what we're looking to do is basically the code-defined height of the building is about a 43% reduction in what was previously proposed. And reductions pretty much in every aspect of the height. And so I think we feel very strongly that the concerns about the scale and kind of just mass of the structure being addressed through the changes in the plan. So you can kind of see here coming north on Orange Avenue how that tucks into kind of the existing tree line, with the existing Hudson Crossings condo on the immediate left that you see there, which is a 4-story building, as well as, peeking through the trees there, the downtown zone districts with 18 stories across the street. Similarly here, kind of just seeing the scale comparison in height as it relates to the different roadways. One of the other things that we did is, we were trying to understand what the scale of the single family residential developments to the south would allot for. And we actually found some pretty surprising things, I think, here on the cross sections with regards to, the existing Hudson Crossing, building in the background at about 45 feet in height. versus the proposed parking structure where the solar panel roof array is at about 48 feet in height. I think contextually the cross section is pretty flat, and I think the scale of this as we looked around the area was pretty interesting. Selby, where this parking structure is proposed, the FEMA base flood elevation is essentially this black line across the bottom here, and so all of the definitions in height are restricted to being measured from that line. And as we all know, architectural features and elevator overruns and things like that, tend to go up above those code definitions of height. As we looked to the surrounding immediate adjacent neighbor, while RMF 3 only allows for 35 feet in height, and we're asking for 40, the lowest elevation of the building to the highest architectural feature is about 57 feet. Taller than kind of lowest elevation to top of elevator feature for the parking garage. And furthermore, that carries into, the single family communities to the south. When the definition of the height starts at the base flood elevation, which is your ground floor, or this datum line, the perception of the building and its scale, doesn't mean that is an imaginary line that's non-existent. And when you look at this single family home that is restricted to 35 feet in height, its architectural feature to lowest elevation is almost 60 feet in height. And so, I think the consideration of some of the community feedback that we heard that, it's not appropriate with the neighborhood, we really did want to kind of challenge that consideration and make it known that, this is no different. And in fact, it's shorter than some of your immediate neighbors' homes. And so I think the message on that, as you look to kind of the scaled comparison of RMF 3 at 35 feet, Botanical Gardens at 40 feet, and RSF 1 at 35 feet, kind of the scale of those structures and how they can relate, all depending on a base flood elevation. And so I think, the design of the structure certainly resulted in something that was much more compatible in scale with an accessory use restaurant that was on the roof that is now on the ground, an accessory in use and only open to Gardens members during Gardens hours and not the general public. I think it was kind of interesting to hear from one of the planning board members that he really disliked that aspect of the project because it was not inclusive. It was felt as almost as if a private club in nature, and I really respect and agree with that perspective. And unfortunately, that's what the community and the commission has asked of Selby to do, is to not have this open to the general public, to not serve in a commercial restaurant nature, but to only have it be available to kind of the members of the garden. So I thought it was an interesting dialogue, and frankly, one of the I'd say understood but unintended consequences of addressing the concerns that we heard through public testimony last year. So with that, we're hopefully going to be putting this in front of the commission sometime in November or December, and are excited to make the case for why we think this is a great project for the city of Sarasota, how we've addressed kind of the additional concerns of the community, why we think it's a better plan, and we hope that the commission will agree with us in that regard. So with that, I'd love to open up the last kind of 15 minutes or so to any Q&A from the group.
That's awesome, Chris. Thanks so much. I mean, what an amazing project. Obviously, a whole lot has gone into that. Were there any questions to start off today from anyone? And remember to unmute yourself if possible, and if not, just let me know in the chat. Well, Chris, I'll definitely just kind of make a point. I think it's definitely interesting. Obviously, what an exercise in kind of that tough to define concept of compatibility, right? But I mean, obviously, this project's gone to great lengths to try to, not only make things more appealing and appetizing for some of the neighbors who might have concerns, but there's definitely that project site-wide kind of stepping down of intensity and height closer to 41, where you have those 18-story buildings permitted by height. That's where the garage is, and you're kind of stepping down those intensities and heights and uses as you approach the traditional single family neighborhood. So that's definitely just an exercise in compatibility that I'm sure the designers on this project had to go through.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how I
I,
know it was an awesome presentation. I answered all the questions. You had it in your head and I answered it. So
I had a question about the restaurant. Is there any opportunity to walk that back from being a private facility, or
yeah,
does it?
so I wish, I really do wish. Unfortunately, so this is kind of where the restaurant landed on the ground. Unfortunately, really, the city's code is quite clear, in that it needs to function in an accessory form, um, to the principal use. And we spent some time with staff with regards to, well, can that just be hours of operation? And really kind of went back and forth on that. And staff's determination was that it needed to not only mirror the garden's hours, but also needed to really be considered accessory, be accessible from kind of the secured kind of perimeter of the gardens. And so, um, what the plan is for right now is that you would come in through the welcome center and you would pay your admission or show your membership, and then you would go into the restaurant here. One of the things that Selby is trying to come up with is a way for you to not have to make that awkward loop, but that they might have like a gardens membership that's just for the restaurant, that's maybe at a discounted rate or something like that, that would enable you to go into the restaurant, show your membership, before you're seated, but not have to kind of circumvent and go out of your way to get into it. So that's something that I think we would be able to find support for from a staff interpretation perspective, but one that Selby is just kind of trying to sort out operationally.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I wish.
And I know that was also an area of concern through the first versions of the plan, Chris, was probably the neighbors' hesitation of just seeing a restaurant as another form of foot traffic, as another form of potential noise incompatibilities, things like that. So I know that's definitely something the design team heard and kind of heard from the commission as well on that.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
I did just want to bring up another point there too, Chris, and this is something that I haven't heard too much on, but I thought it was just very interesting design-wise. The garage is going to be able to kind of take some of those traditional loading, unloading facilities that you hear, which a lot of neighbors obviously have concern. No one likes to hear the backup beeping trucks, things like that, and to be able to kind of include that into the design of the garage is very cool, I think.
Yeah, frankly, that was the thing that our team, I think, spent the most time on during the redesign process. It's no easy feat getting a 18-wheeler through a parking garage. So, we had to sacrifice a bit of efficiency in the layout and efficiency in the parking plan on the ground floor, to be able to accommodate that. But I think, collectively, we're all really proud of the fact that, other than a full length flatbed, the big 53-foot long trailers that you see on the highway, every other design vehicle can maneuver through the garage. And so, changing that from an operations perspective, I think is certainly going to be a benefit for everyone to not have to have those go onto Orange Avenue like they did in the original design. So, loading zone and loading bay and trash and recycling operations all within the garage footprint is certainly something that cleans up the neighborhood a bit.
Yeah, and it's just not something I've seen a whole lot of in other projects, at that scale too. So I just thought that was just a very, it might seem like a minor thing, but very interesting.
Yeah. Agree.
Awesome. Was there any more questions today? And I'm monitoring the chat, not seeing any. Because Chris did do an amazing job.
Well, I'm always around and happy to provide any additional thoughts or insight that anyone might have after the fact too.
Hey there, this is Vivian, and Chris, that was wonderful. That was beautiful, and I know the huge task this has been, and I really appreciate you coming and presenting to us.
Happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to see how this evolves. So thank you everybody too for attending, and thanks James for organizing.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. And with a presenter like Chris in this project, I mean, what a joy. Just a great presentation overall. A fascinating project that definitely has kind of that, generational impact on the city here. It's just, when you talk about a site that large within the city that's largely built out, it's always going to be, a very opinionated, very difficult to please everyone at the table, but definitely going through that planning process and taking all the different stakeholders, opinions, advice, beliefs on that. That's definitely been, a whole lot of work, and definitely appreciate that, Chris. It'll be a great project if it gets approval here.
Fingers crossed.
Chris, can you remind me, are you a landscape architect?
Yes.
Yes. All right. I really appreciate LAs.
Well, thank you.
That's what I graduated into.
No, it's certainly a field which I love, and I think other than that, everyone who's especially a city resident, please be sure to vote. That's like most things I feel like in life this year, it's all going to come down to the election for this project. So, get out there and spread the word of the work that's been done to make it better for everyone. So we appreciate the time.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everyone so much for your time today. If you have any more questions, you can always feel free to reach out to myself, and I can always get you in touch with Chris. But we appreciate everyone's time. We're going to wrap up this meeting today. I hope everyone has a good, safe rest of the 2020. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. And thanks everyone for your time.
See y'all. Thank you.
Yep. Have a great night. Bye.